It wasn't even dessert yet when she decided to humiliate me. She drinks cheap wine, just like the trash she came from. Carol said it with the grace of someone who'd rehearsed it in the mirror. She didn't raise her voice, didn't have to. The room was already quiet, save for the clinking of forks and the soft hum of a classical playlist no one was listening to. But her words sliced clean through the table like a knife through satin. My hand froze halfway to my lips, glass trembling slightly. And in that moment, I wasn't sure what stung more, the insult or the fact that no one at that table flinched. Michael, my husband, sat 2 seats down, eyes fixed on his plate like it had suddenly become fascinating. Not even a glance in my direction. Not even a mom. Enough. It was just me. Me and the wine glass I suddenly wanted to throw across the room. But I didn't. Because I'd learned long ago that exploding only gave her more to feed on. Carol didn't need approval to feel powerful, just silence. And that night, she got plenty of it. We were at her house, the big white one with Greek columns and boxwood hedges that she liked to call the Mitchell Estate, as if it were a museum, and not just a house with too much marble. The table was set like a magazine spread, bone china, crystal stemware, linen napkins folded into origami swans. It was supposed to be a celebration. Michael had just been promoted to VP at his firm, and in typical Carol fashion, she made it about her son, her legacy, her perfect family lineage that I, in her eyes, would never be a part of. She had seated me at the farthest end of the table, closest to the patio door. My name card was spelled wrong. Kara, with a K, even though she's known me for 6 years. Everyone else had little handwritten notes under their names. Mine was blank. I smiled through it. That's what I always did. Until she said that. I caught her gaze. She was already looking away, her glass raised in a mock toast to nothing in particular. That's when Walter stood. Her husband, Michael's stepfather, had always been the quiet one. Soft-spoken, gentle. A man you could miss in a crowd, but never underestimate. Without a word, he walked the length of the table and stopped at my side. "Let me freshen that up for you," he said, already taking the glass from my hand. "But the wine's lost its soul," he said with a dry chuckle, disappearing into the kitchen before I could protest. The room buzzed back to life. Someone coughed. Someone else started talking about a vacation to Aruba. Minutes later, Walter returned with a new glass. Same wine, same temperature, same everything. Except it wasn't. I took a sip. It was fine. But something in the air shifted. Carol's smile didn't reach her eyes anymore. She kept glancing toward me, then at Walter, then back at her plate, as if waiting for something. And when nothing happened, when I didn't cough, faint, or drop dead on her tablecloth, her fingers clenched ever so slightly around her fork. She was confused, and I didn't know why. Not yet. But across the table, Walter met my eyes and gave me the smallest nod. A nod that said, "You're not crazy." And I saw it too. I didn't marry Michael for his last name. I married him because he made me laugh on the worst day of my life. It was a Tuesday. My mom had just passed 2 weeks earlier, and I was barely functioning. The world felt gray, cold. And somehow, he walked into the same bookstore I'd retreated to. Clutching a coffee he immediately spilled on the carpet by the gardening section. I laughed before I could stop myself. He looked at me, smiled like it was a secret just between us, and said, "I guess I'm terrible at both growing things and drinking them." That was our beginning. It was simple, soft, and nothing like the life that would follow. Michael wasn't rich, not then, not really, but he came from money, old money, Carol's money, and she made sure I knew it. When we got engaged, she didn't even fake a congratulations. She simply looked me up and down and asked, "Do you own any real jewelry?" I laughed awkwardly. "No, just family stuff. Sentimental pieces." She blinked. "Ah, sentimental doesn't sparkle." I should have run then, but I didn't, because I thought I could win her over. So I tried. God, I tried. I gave up my apartment and moved into the townhouse next door to hers so she could drop by whenever. I paused my work as a freelance designer to help care for her when she had hip surgery. She refused a nurse and asked for me specifically. I I told myself, this is it. This is how I get in. I cooked, cleaned, took her to doctor appointments, listened to her stories about European summers and men she almost married. I laughed when she mocked my plain shoes, bit my tongue when she asked if I'd ever considered dental whitening, for the cameras, of course. She liked to say things in front of others. That way, I couldn't answer back. Michael would brush it off. That's just how she is. She's harmless. But words aren't harmless when they come like raindrops, constant, inevitable, enough to erode stone if left alone long enough. Still, I held on, because I thought if I could just prove myself, just show her I was worthy, she'd come around. When Walter, her husband, had a heart scare 2 years ago, I was the one who stayed overnight at the hospital. She left after 4 hours. Michael was on a work trip. I sat by that man's bed, holding his hand when he thought he wouldn't wake up. When the doctor brought out a stack of forms, she wasn't there to sign. I was. Walter looked me in the eye and said, "You're the only one who stays." I didn't think much of it at the time. A few months later, he asked for my help reviewing property paperwork. Carol wanted to sell off a historic building they owned, one Walter had poured years into restoring. He wasn't sure he could trust her with the details. So I sat with him for hours, scanning documents, helping him file things properly, making digital backups. He handed me a flash drive and said, "Keep this somewhere safe, in case things go sideways." I said, "Sideways how?" He didn't answer, just nodded and poured us both tea. Looking back, I think he knew more than I did. Meanwhile, Carol's disapproval only grew. When I offered to help plan Michael's 35th birthday party, she told me to stick to baking. The real decisions are family matters. When I got offered a job at a local arts nonprofit, my dream field, she said, "Do you really want to be away from Michael that much?" I turned the job down because I thought maybe if I'd just make life easier for her. But nothing was enough. When we hosted Easter brunch at our place, she showed up an hour late and walked straight into the kitchen. Smells humble, she said. I cried in the pantry after that, quietly, so Michael wouldn't hear. Still, I stayed, because some small, foolish part of me believed love could be earned. That family was something you earned your way into, one casserole and load of laundry at a time. And every time she threw another dig my way, I told myself, if I can survive one more, just one more, I'll finally belong. But what I didn't realize, what took me too long to understand, is that you can't build belonging out of bruises. You can't love someone into seeing you if they've already decided you're invisible. So when she smiled across the dinner table and watched me raise that wine glass, whatever she'd put in it, she wasn't just trying to humiliate me. She was finishing a war I didn't know I'd been in, and I was still standing. Even then, there's a sound that lives in your bones when someone takes credit for your pain. It's not a shout, not even a whisper. It's silence. The kind that crawls across your skin in a room full of people and makes you wonder if you ever really existed to begin with. That's what I heard the night Carol stood at that charity gala in front of 300 donors and said, "We couldn't have launched this center without the vision of my daughter-in-law, Emily." Emily, Michael's sister, Carol's golden girl, the one who hadn't even been in the country when I spent 9 months building that domestic violence resource center from the ground up. The one who once asked me if those kinds of women even wanted help. The one who never showed up, not for one planning meeting, not one fundraiser, not one ribbon tied to the front door. And yet, there she stood, beaming in a designer dress, accepting applause for something she never lifted a finger to build. I didn't say anything. I smiled. I clapped. I stood in the shadows like I always had. But something in me cracked, and it didn't heal this time. Because earlier that week, I'd found a folder in Michael's office. He'd left it open, absent-mindedly maybe, or maybe not. Inside were documents with my name on them, bank accounts, a mortgage, except my name had been crossed out, replaced, with Emily's. Carol's fingerprints were all over it, her favorite estate lawyer, her handwriting in the margins. Her notes. Needs to be finalized before fall. She'll be out by then. Me. They were planning to transfer the deed on our home, the home Walter helped us buy, directly to Emily. I didn't even get a mention, not a warning, not a conversation, just a quiet erasure. And Michael? When I asked him what it meant, he sighed, as if I were the one being dramatic. She's better with money, he said. You're always emotional about the house. Maybe it's better this way. Better. I slept in the guest room that night, and the next. Still, I said nothing, because part of me, some foolish, beaten part, still clung to the belief that maybe I could fight this with grace, that maybe Walter would step in, that maybe love could win. But then came the brunch, another celebration, Carol's birthday this time. She insisted on holding it at our home, said it was better for entertaining, brought in caterers, florists, valet parking, told me to stay out of the kitchen so you don't embarrass yourself. By 11 a.m., she was sipping champagne like it was her name on the deed already, and at noon, she clinked her glass. I'd like to thank Emily, she said, voice bright and tight with pride, for agreeing to move in and take care of things. This house deserves a real Mitchell touch. Someone gasped. Another laughed softly. I stood in the back hallway, frozen, still holding the bouquet I'd picked up that morning, still thinking I had a role in this family, still thinking I had time. That was the moment, the one that changed everything, because I didn't cry, I didn't run. I walked outside, past the tables, past the guests, and I called Walter. I hadn't spoken to him in days, not since the dinner with the wine glass. He answered on the second ring. I was wondering when you'd call. I didn't know what to say. He did. Come see me tomorrow, he said, before they try anything else. And that night, I packed a bag. I didn't tell Michael, didn't leave a note, because there's a point, a moment, when survival isn't about choosing battles anymore. It's about walking off the battlefield entirely and letting them burn their own kingdom down. Walter's house was quiet in the morning. That kind of heavy, deliberate quiet only old men and old houses know how to keep. He didn't offer coffee, didn't ask how I was. He just handed me an envelope. It was thick, weighted, sealed. Inside, a copy of the property title, the one for our home. My name was on it, only mine. He looked at me and said simply, I never trusted her with anything that couldn't be replaced. He meant Carol. I was still holding the envelope when he added, You'll want to show that soon, before the story spreads. What story? He smiled, sad and tired. The one where she paints you as the villain. She's been preparing it, whispering it into family ears, calling in favors. I blinked. Why give this to me now? Because, he said, standing slowly, I saw you drink that glass at dinner, and she saw you survive it. I froze. I hadn't told anyone, not what I suspected, not what I feared. He walked to a drawer, pulled out a tiny flash drive, and dropped it next to the envelope. Security footage, from the hallway camera, it caught her hand, and the vial. My breath caught in my throat. She doesn't know I installed it. She never bothered learning how to turn it off. My hands shook, not from fear, from the weight of being believed, truly, finally, believed. I left his house with both items in my purse, and I waited. Carol didn't take long. 3 days later, she announced a surprise Mitchell family brunch at a downtown club. Michael said it was for Walter's birthday, though Walter's birthday had passed 2 weeks earlier. Still, he asked me to come. It'll be good for the family, he said. I told him I'd think about it. Then I booked a meeting, quietly, with Carol's estate attorney. He didn't know who I was at first, but when I laid the title and flash drive on the table, his expression changed. Fast. I don't want money, I said. I want to be left alone, and I want the truth out. Not your version, not hers. He nodded. 2 phone calls later, I had something better than silence. I had an audience. And that Sunday, I showed up to brunch in the same dress Carol once mocked me for. Looks like an off-the-rack pity purchase, she'd whispered at the last family gathering. This time, I wore it with lipstick and purpose. Carol greeted me with a smile that didn't touch her eyes. "Didn't expect to see you, dear," she said, brushing a non-existent speck from my shoulder. I smiled back. "Oh, I wouldn't miss it." The room buzzed with polite laughter, soft music, silverware on china. Cousins I hadn't seen in years, her country club friends. Even the caterer looked nervous around her. She tapped her glass, again with that signature clink, and rose. "I just wanted to say how grateful I am to have family like this," she began. "People who understand legacy, honor, and above all, loyalty." That was my cue. I stood. She faltered mid-sentence. Her voice wavered. I didn't speak. Not yet. I simply walked to the front, opened my purse, and placed the envelope on the table. Then the flash drive. Then I turned to Walter, who hadn't touched his glass all morning, and said, "Would you like to explain, or should I?" He nodded once, then leaned forward, and the room, every guest, every fork, every breath, went still. Walter didn't stand. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He reached out slowly, picked up the flash drive with careful fingers, and said, "Some of you remember that dinner a few weeks ago, the one Carol hosted at the house." A few heads nodded. "She said it was to celebrate Michael's promotion, but it was more than that. It was a performance, one she'd been scripting for years." Carol's smile cracked, just slightly. Walter continued, his voice even. "There's a camera in the hallway near the wine cabinet. Not that she ever noticed. I installed it after the housekeeper's earrings went missing last year." He looked around. What it caught was my wife pouring something into a wine glass, then placing it in front of someone she considered disposable. There was a gasp. Someone dropped a fork. Carol stood up. "Walter, stop this. You're confused." He ignored her. "I swapped the glass. She never drank it, but she would have." He looked at me. And that's when I made my decision. He turned back to the crowd. "I rewrote my will that same night. Removed Carol from everything. Transferred the Mitchell estate and my personal accounts to the one person in this room who has never asked me for anything, never lied to my face, and never treated me like a burden." Someone whispered, "Is he serious?" Michael stood. "Dad, you can't. This is insane. She's manipulating you." Walter chuckled. A low, sad sound. "You think I'm being manipulated? You didn't even know what she put in that wine." Michael blinked, then looked at Carol. "What did you do?" Carol's eyes darted. "He's old. He doesn't know what he saw." Walter reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a printed lab report. "I had the glass tested, and the vial I found in your purse, Carol. Sedative, high dose, enough to drop someone long enough to fake a seizure, or worse." No one breathed. Even the air seemed to retreat. Then Walter said the final thing. "I may be old, but I'm not blind, and I've been watching this woman," he gestured to me, "hold this family together while the rest of you tried to tear her down." Carol opened her mouth, closed it. Her hands trembled slightly. "I trusted you," she finally whispered. "After everything, you betray me for her?" Walter looked at her long and hard. "I'm not betraying you," he said. "I'm holding you accountable." And then, quietly, but with full control, he turned to the club's AV manager standing by the wall. "Play it." The screen on the far side of the room flickered on. A hallway view appeared, black and white, silent. Carol, in pearls. Carefully unscrewing something and tipping it into a wine glass, then placing it down, in front of my chair. People gasped. Others turned away. Michael just stared, pale, motionless. Carol looked around, like a cornered animal, not sure which way to bolt. I didn't move, didn't smile, didn't say a word. I just looked at her, the same way she'd once looked at me, like something that could be swept off the patio tiles with a broom. Now she was the one being swept out. The silence stretched, and finally Walter turned to me and said clearly, "The house is yours. The accounts are yours. I already signed the transfers. All that's left is for you to decide what you want to do." And in that moment, standing in the center of a room full of people who once pitied me, ignored me, diminished me, I didn't feel vindicated. I felt free. No one moved. The screen went dark. The waiters didn't know whether to keep pouring mimosas or pack up the silverware. One of Carol's tennis friends excused herself and never came back. The only sound in the room was the soft clink of Walter setting down his glass, and Carol just stood there, like a statue no one admired anymore. She didn't say a word, couldn't. Her lips were parted, but there were no words left sharp enough to cut through what everyone had just seen. Eventually, someone tried to recover. It was Michael. He cleared his throat, loudly. Forced a smile like this was all a misunderstanding. She's been under stress, he stammered. We've all been stretched thin. Maybe we should talk about this in private. Walter looked at him, really looked at him, like he was seeing his stepson for the first time. You had every opportunity to see what she was doing, Walter said. You looked the other way every time she tore this woman down. Michael didn't reply. He just looked at me. And I didn't offer him anything back. No warmth, no forgiveness, no explanation. He didn't deserve any. He was no longer my husband, not in any way that mattered. Carol sat down, finally, quietly, as if hoping that by making herself smaller she might disappear. But it was too late. Her name had already disappeared from Walter's will, from every document she thought she had locked under her thumb. One of her friends leaned in to whisper something. She shook her head and stared straight ahead. Nobody wanted to be seen beside her anymore. The fallout began quickly. By Monday morning, the country club had suspended her honorary board position. On Tuesday, the charity she once dominated posted a quiet update on their website. Board member Carol Mitchell has stepped down indefinitely, and by the end of the week, even Emily, her beloved daughter, had gone silent online. No photos, no stories, not even a birthday post for her mother. That said everything. As for Michael, he showed up to the house 2 days later. He didn't knock, just stood on the porch holding a grocery bag, like we were still pretending. I brought the rosemary crackers you like, he said, eyes low. I opened the door, but didn't step aside. He looked tired, hollow. I didn't know what she was planning, he said. I swear. I said nothing. I didn't. He tried again, voice cracking. I didn't think she'd actually try to hurt you. And that's the problem, I finally replied. He blinked. You didn't think, I said, because it was easier not to. He tried to laugh. It came out broken. I was just trying to keep the peace. No, I said. You were trying to keep your mother happy. And you didn't care what it cost me. He opened his mouth again. I shut the door, not in anger, not in hate, just peace. Because there's a kind of freedom that doesn't scream or slam doors or post it online. It's the kind that comes when you finally stop needing closure from people who never deserved access to your heart in the first place. 3 weeks later, Carol came back to the house. Not to take it back, not to apologize. She came with her lawyer. She didn't make it past the gate. Walter had already filed the property transfer. I was listed as the sole and legal owner. No contest, no loophole, no fine print. The gate code had been changed. Still, she stood at the iron bars in a beige coat that looked suddenly too heavy for spring. Her lawyer stood beside her, shifting from foot to foot, clearly uncomfortable. I stepped outside with my coffee, calm, barefoot. She didn't look at me, not at first, just said, I left some heirlooms in the upstairs study. I took a sip. They're not yours, I said. They were my grandmother's. And yet, I said softly, they were gifted to Walter in writing. He gave them to me. I have the document if you'd like a copy. Her lips pressed into a line so thin it almost vanished. Then she tried something else. I gave you everything, she hissed. You were nothing. I blinked, tilted my head. Then why were you so afraid of me? She had no answer, only a look I'll never forget. The look of someone who finally sees the reflection they spent a lifetime avoiding. The lawyer cleared his throat, mumbled something about returning with a request for itemized belongings. I nodded. Put it in writing. I'll consider it. They left in silence, and the silence was loud with everything she couldn't take back. Later that evening, I walked through the house, not with ownership, not with triumph, but with presence. It was the same hallway where she once passed me without a glance, same kitchen where she'd criticized my cooking, same stairwell where Michael once whispered that I needed to try harder if I wanted to be seen. And now, it was still, not empty, just still. In the study, Walter had left me a sealed envelope. I hadn't opened it until now. Inside was a short note in his handwriting. "The house is yours, but the wait is optional. Let it go when you're ready. Thank you for staying when no one else did. W." I didn't cry. I just folded it neatly, slid it into the drawer, and exhaled. I never went public, never gave interviews, never posted a single word about what happened, but word got around. It always does in circles like hers. Carol stopped getting invited to the things she once hosted. Her name disappeared from the in honor of donor lists. And the stares she used to throw like daggers now came from others, women who once admired her, now wondering what else she was capable of behind closed doors. As for Michael, I mailed him the divorce papers 3 weeks later. No note, just clean pages, signed and final. He didn't fight, didn't even respond. I think in the end he realized silence wasn't a shield anymore. It was just proof of absence. I kept the house, but not the memories inside it. I donated most of the furniture, repainted the walls, took down every mirror Carol had installed, the ones with ornate gold frames and nothing but coldness behind them. And in their place I put plants, real ones, wild ones that grew on their own terms. The rosemary bush in the front yard bloomed again this spring. It's a silly thing to notice, I know, especially after everything. But that bush has never bloomed properly. Not since Carol had the landscaper hack it down one summer because it looked unkempt. This year, though, the little purple flowers showed up early and stubborn. I guess that's what healing looks like. Quiet, persistent, a little rough around the edges. I spend most mornings now sitting by the kitchen window, mug in hand, watching sunlight move across the floor. It doesn't sound like much, but after years of holding my breath, even silence feels like music. I didn't redecorate the house to erase the past. I did it to reclaim space. I replaced the heavy chandeliers with warm pendant lights, took down the portraits Carol hung of herself and her side of the family, hung up nothing in their place, just left the walls blank, open. Some days I bake, some days I don't. I planted basil on the windowsill, lavender by the back gate, painted the old library in a soft blue and filled it with secondhand books, the kind I never had time to read when I was too busy surviving someone else's narrative. Walter visits sometimes, never unannounced. He brings jam or a book he thinks I'll like, always insists on leaving before lunch so I don't feel obligated to feed him. His way of saying he respects the boundaries now. "I'm glad you stayed," he said the last time he left. And for the first time, I was glad too. Not out of stubbornness, not out of vengeance, but because I realized something. I never wanted revenge. I wanted peace. And that peace didn't come from taking something back. It came from finally choosing myself. There was a time I thought being accepted by that family would give me meaning, that if I just tried hard enough, they'd love me back. They didn't, and I survived anyway. If you're watching this and you've ever sat at a table where someone made you feel like less, where the wine stung more than it soothed, where your silence was treated like consent, please know this: you don't have to wait for a seat at their table. You can build your own. And yes, it might be quieter, but the people who sit with you there, they'll be the ones who see you, the ones who hear your voice even when you're not speaking. I get letters sometimes now, notes, messages, mostly from women. Some say, "I thought I was alone." Others say, "Your story gave me the courage to leave." And one, the one I'll never forget, said this: "They told me I was too much. You made me realize I was never enough for the wrong people." That's the thing no one tells you. Sometimes the only way to win is to walk away. Not because you've given up, but because you finally remembered you don't have to stay where you're not seen. The other day, a little girl from down the street brought me a plant in a paper cup, a sprout. She said it came from their classroom's science project and they were supposed to give it to someone kind. I didn't say much, just thanked her, and watched as she ran back down the sidewalk, arms swinging. I left the cup by the kitchen window. The roots are still shallow, but it's reaching for the light, just like me. And to you, yes, you, watching this, if you've ever been humiliated behind a smile, if someone ever tried to make your silence look like weakness, if you've ever walked away from a table you set but were never welcomed at, you're not alone. Your story isn't over. It's just beginning again, this time on your terms. So build your peace, speak your truth, and please, leave a comment if this felt like your story too. Because somewhere out there, someone else is still afraid to leave. And your voice might be the hand they reach for in the dark. Share this with someone who needs to know they're not the crazy one. And if you haven't yet, subscribe. We're building a table here, one chair at a time, and there's room for you.